Stacey Edwards started their journey into the mystery way back in 1997 when they shared a paradigm-shifting paranormal experience together. The event sent them down a road together that not too many people travel in 1997, investigating the paranormal. Over the years, John has been an independent pro wrestler with over 200 episodes of a nationally syndicated TV show. He was also the lead singer of a local metal band called Dead Level, as well as a successful businessman up and down the East Coast with a Fortune 300 company. Stacey has managed many retail locations and runs the day-to-day operations of the Edwards house, as well as the business side of the paranormal endeavors. After running several organized paranormal teams, John and Stacey started the Haunted South Paranormal Podcast in 2010. In 2014, John and Stacey started the Third Side Paranormal Podcast on iTunes and a video show which is available for free on YouTube. In 2016, John made a special guest appearance on Ghost Brothers as they investigated one of the most haunted places John has ever experienced. The duo have recently published their first book, Til Death and Beyond, The Haunted Journey of John and Stacey Edwards, and getting back to their roots with the Paranormal Sideshow by bringing you stories on the paranormal, ufology, cryptozoology, and the weird in general. Welcome to Strange Things.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Nice to see you, Chris.
I just finished your book. What was it called again?
It's called Til Death and Beyond, The Haunted Journey of John and Stacey Edwards.
Yeah, I was reading it. I was fascinated. I was really getting into it. And then I flipped the page, and it's like, it's over. So now I hope y'all are working on a sequel.
Yes, actually we are. We have some things going on in our private life. Well, not really private life. In what we do here with the Paranormal Sideshow, we've got some things we're chronicling day by day this time, and really trying to make sure we capture everything. They actually took a couple of chapters out of the book before they published it, not because they were bad, but because they were dealing more with UFOs. And they were like, we would like you to keep the one UFO chapter in there because it deals with your childhood, but the rest of them doesn't really fit the theme of the paranormal. So the book I presented was actually a bit longer than the final copy.
I've always considered UFOs as being paranormal as well as Bigfoot. Yeah,
and really with what we do, we always include them together. It's you go to a convention, it's where you meet like-minded people that are interested normally in cryptozoology and UFOs and paranormal. So, we're the same way. We group them all together.
Y'all both saw a shadow person in your home. Would you like to fill the listeners in on that a little?
Sure. Yeah, that was our first experience together. It's what kind of got us started in this whole paranormal investigating. So it was shortly after John and I had met, and we were at my house, and John came over all the time, and we usually just spent the night in and hung out and that sort of thing. We were still just dating at the time. And the night before we saw this strange shadow person, we had been goofing off with this book that we found in this little New Age shop. And at the time, I was in college, and I was taking this writing class, and I had been doing a lot of writing papers and research papers on past life regression and different New Age topics. And so I like to go to these little stores and try to find research and interesting books that I could read. And John, he didn't really believe in any of the paranormal stuff, like ghosts or any of that kind of thing. But he tagged along with me. We went to this store, and it was just this little hole-in-the-wall shop. And so he tagged along, and I was looking for some books for my paper, and he found this little book called Invoking the Spirit. And he was like, I think I'm going to get this. And, you know, I was like, well, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, let's get it. So we bought it. And we had it that night, and we were goofing off. And so he's like, well, let's get this book out, and I'm going to do this thing at the end. And I said, well, don't you think you should read that first? And he's like, no, it's fine. Let's just flip to the end and do this incantation here at the back of the book. So we got all the stuff that it said, which oddly we had in the house. We had the candles and the mirrors and all the stuff they wanted, the water and all that. And so he started reading this incantation. John's very theatrical. He's a performer at heart. And so he put all of his gusto into it and just really did this great performance. And you know, nothing really happened. A couple of little candles flickering, nothing you could say was really paranormal. So we sort of forgot about it. But then the next day, we were at my house, and he was cooking. He was in the kitchen, and he was cooking hamburgers for us to have for dinner. And I was in the living room, and I was watching, like, Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy, one of those two shows. I think it was Wheel of Fortune. And so the kitchen and the living room are separated. There's a wall in between, so he couldn't see me. I couldn't see him. There was just a door that went in between the two rooms. And the house, it was the middle of summer. It was really hot. It didn't have any air conditioning. You know, we were just kids. We were, you know, kind of poor. We didn't really have a lot of money, so we just lived in this little non-air conditioned duplex. And so he had the back door open, and I had the front door open. We were trying to get a cross breeze going. And so I'm just sitting there watching television, and well, John saw it first. I'll let him tell you what he saw.
Yeah, well, I mean, as she said, that may have been the last time that I ever prepared supper, I believe. But I was still trying to impress her at the time. I was making the dinner, and the time of the day it was, being in the summer, the sun was beating down through the kitchen window, and we had the cross breeze. We had the door open, as she said. Screen door was closed and locked in the kitchen area where I was. But that door was over to the right of me, and the sun was also coming through that, you know, just beating in, and it had to be 80 degrees still. Not much of a breeze at all, if any. And I felt something before I seen something, I can say that. And I looked over to the right of me, and there's no other way to put what I seen except it was completely solid black shadow man, complete shape of a man, except he was in the running position. And the strange thing about this, Chris, is he was in the running position, but he was moving so quickly that you didn't really see the legs move or the arms move. It was, if you could imagine a runner coming off the mark and probably in his first or second stride, just really getting into it and digging in. That's what it was. He was running, but he goes right past me. And the next thing I know, in the next room where Stacey is, we had one of those old, and I call it a dollar store shade when I tell the story, because that's literally what it was. And we had pulled it down too far. And if anybody who has ever lived through that knows, when you pull them down too far, you have to hand roll them to get them back up, because you can no longer do the little motion to make it roll up on its own. So I had it down all the way, and I heard the shade go just completely go up. At that moment, Stacey hollers and just says my name. And she's like, John, and I just said, I don't want to talk about it. That's what I hollered back in there. And we didn't talk about it for, a couple of days or
I think maybe almost a week. But when I was sitting in the living room, I didn't know that John was seeing that, but I was looking straight ahead at the television, and the kitchen was on my left. So out of the corner of my eye, I saw this shadow come out of the kitchen door, and it ran directly in front of me, between me and the television, and it went straight out the window right beside me. And it looked exactly like what John saw. It looked like a man running, and I remember thinking that for some reason that it looked like he was running. And when it passed me, it completely blocked out the television. That's how dark it was and how black it was. And then it hit that window, and the shade went up, and I couldn't think of anything to say or do except to holler for John. And he just said, I don't want to talk about it. So, we didn't.
Man.
For a while.
It's interesting when two people have a shared experience like that. It's like me and my wife when we saw a ghost on an elevator at a hospital. And if one person sees it, it's like, well, that's just weird, but it's just their story. But if you and your significant other both see it, there's no denying it. And it sure adds to the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it really, over the years, the paranormal has brought us together closer, just because when you share an experience, anybody who goes through any kind of trauma, any kind of event, it always brings you closer. Mm-hmm. And because we did have that experience, at the time we couldn't find a team, being that we live in the third notch of the Bible Belt. We looked on the early days of the internet and tried finding a team, and the closest thing was probably 6 hours away. Ooh. I believe it was Charlotte or Nashville, I think was the one we found. And from where we lived, there was no way. So we did things on our own until I actually, formed a team.
Oh, that was in Tennessee?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Have y'all...
Actually, East Tennessee.
East, over towards Gatlinburg.
Yeah, really close. About 90 minutes from Gatlinburg.
Beautiful country, but too many mountains.
I agree, but I can't escape. I keep trying.
Have you ever managed to track down your cousin that worked at Area 51, or is he still MIA?
He is actually still MIA, and I ask the family about him quite often. I'm hesitant to say, his name.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't.
Like that. I would definitely give it to you privately, but I will say this. He told me some amazing things even when I was younger. I remember him telling my father something, but they wanted to go to the beach because we were doing a family outing. There was some kind of family reunion, and they wanted to go near the water for him to tell him everything. Mm-hmm. He told him some things, and I remember him showing him some papers. And I was getting the conversation, but I wasn't included in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And then I remember him going completely AWOL shortly thereafter. And because we're family, yes, I remember us taking him food and money to various little roadside motels. And he eventually paid to, he eventually, as weird as this is, he was back in the service before we knew it. And it was like there was no punishment. I remember wondering about that as a kid. And when I say kid, I was an early teenager when that first happened. But he had these amazing stories that he had told, but then everybody just shut up about it. Mm-hmm. And that was up until the time when he was listening to Haunted South and got a hold of me and, wanted to tell me, it was crazy. He just got a hold of me on a Facebook message. It was like, look, you think you've heard something. I got things I need to tell you I can't say on here. I'd love to meet and all this stuff. The next day, his account was completely gone. And sometimes, I don't know if you've ever had a friend who closed their account down and it'll just say Facebook user. Mm-hmm. I still have that message from all those years ago on my Facebook. I don't delete it, but it just says Facebook user. And none of the family, and this is a first cousin too. This isn't like a second or third cousin. This is a first cousin. None of the family knows where he is. And, he's still completely MIA, but ever since he talked to me about that. But the stories that I do remember of it was he was really big into martial arts. He was, he was always braggadocious, and that was probably his downfall. He ran his mouth too much, but he was working out there in that area, we'll say. And he started telling stories of, being certain things he was guarding and being flown into a facility and all this before I had, ever really heard much about that. And he had these papers, and I remember him talking about us having UFOs. I remember him saying, hey, it'll blow your mind. We have this stuff. And that's all I remember of him talking about. And he was real excited about it. He was just so excited about it. And so I got real excited, fast forward 20 years when he was going to spill the beans on, with me. So I don't know. I would love to know where he's at.
That is bizarre how things like that happen in your life, and sometimes you never get an answer for it.
It's very strange.
How is it that you're able to pick up EVPs while they're being recorded? I've never heard of anybody else that could do that.
So, you're talking about just as the EVP is being recorded onto the digital recorder, and I know that it's happening.
Yes, you're saying in the book, did you hear that? And everybody's like, what are you talking about? And
Well, no, absolutely. And I try to I got to be careful the way I say this. I'm not a big fan of the advertised psychic, so to speak, because it became so cliche.
Miss Cleo.
And, every team had an empath, right? Mm-hmm. Every team had the resident psychic. And I've always been very skeptical minded, and even though I've experienced so much, but I try to keep it grounded. And what started happening, Chris, is when we started really having these teams together. And funny enough, this just came up recently. Somebody was talking about this because they were wanting to have a reunion of one of our teams, and they're like, well, we have to have John Edwards because we're going to have some stuff happen. But what's happened at the very first is we would go on these investigations, and I would hear something, and exactly what the chapter's called, did you hear that? And somebody would be like, no, what did you hear? And I'd be like, well, I heard distinctly someone say, help me. And we would go back, listen to it. Right at that time when I'm saying that, we would capture that. Somebody else would capture it. And a lot of times we would have two different people that captured the same EVP, which was, great validation. And even on our first documentary that's available free on YouTube from a place called the Kingsport Grocery Company, I'm hearing something say my name and nobody else is hearing it, and then it says it very loudly where people can hear it over headphones. But it's happened to us over and over. I can go into a location, and whereas a team may come out with 10 quality EVPs on a good night, I thought it was normal to come out with 100. And, anywhere from 70 to 100. And, and it was just this nonstop communication, just knowing where things are and hearing it. Now, it's not something that happens, in my daily life that much, but when I'm tuned in, it really is just something that happens. It's just like playing baseball every day, and you get better, you get better, you get better. I believe that anybody can really tune in and get more sensitive to the paranormal when you've been in it for a while, but it definitely seems like it's a gift, but it's always been there, and it's always happened that way. So lucky enough, it's frustrating for me when nobody else hears it, but it's very validating. It's very validating when we're able to rewind, the digital recorder and play that, EVP back. So we've had a lot of skeptics with us over the years, and I always joke about one in particular. We had a newspaper with us one night, and they were wanting to do a story. It was around Halloween, and everybody, during Halloween, you're the most popular people in town, right? So newspapers and TV and everybody wants to do things with you on Halloween time. But this newspaper was with us. It was actually Kingsport Time News from Kingsport, Tennessee, and they were coming with us to a old Sullivan County bank. And it's actually called the Bennett and Edwards Building, and there's still 3 operational businesses in this place. On each floor has a different business. And it's one of the most haunted locations I've ever been to. But this place, we had been several times just because it was so active. And when you find something that's easy, accessible, and very active, you like to go a lot. So we were at this place, and we had this insufferable skeptic with us, you know, and he was just wanting to, his girlfriend was on the team, which makes it worse. Mm-hmm. So he was trying to prove to her that, you know, it was all sham or whatever. And that's fine. We welcome those people. But it was one of the best examples of whatever it is going on with me that night, because we had some K2 meters, which are easily, anybody who does the investigating, you know, you can manipulate a K2 meter if you want it to with, like, cell phone signal. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, if you send a text message on a smartphone, it will register on a K2 meter. Now, it will not register on a mail meter or a tri-field meter. So, you know, I try to use the mail meter only on EMF, but that's a whole nother story. So it's just these K2 meters are easily, you know, can happen. So one night I was asking, you know, I was having great interaction with the spirit, great interaction. And I said, can you take it just up to orange for me? And everybody's pretty much in a circle watching this, and it takes it up to orange for me. I said, okay, hold it there for a minute, and it held it. I said, okay, drop it all the way back down, and it dropped it. All this completely on command right when I'm asking. Take it all the way up to red. So it takes it all the way up to red. So as this is happening, this gentleman was getting more and more frustrated. I don't know why, but he was getting more frustrated. And he was saying, it's just his K2 meter. That's what it is. It's just his K2 meter. So it just so happens there was two other K2 meters in the room. One was his girlfriend's, and one was my partner's. And Stacey loves this, so I'll have her tell you.
So he traded K2 meters with the guy, the friend of his. And the K2 meter, his friend's K2 meter, started doing what he was saying. He would say, turn up to red, and it would go all the way up to red. So the skeptic was still, you know, not convinced. So he said, okay, and he got his back, had his friends, and he took the guy's girlfriend's K2 meter. So he was holding all three of them together, side by side, so they were touching in both of his hands. And he said, you know, can you light these up for me? And so they would all light up. And then he said, can you light up just the one in the middle? And just the one in the middle would light up. I mean, it was the craziest thing that I've ever seen.
And it's actually impossible to do that. If you were trying to do that just for fun and games, mm-hmm. Let's say you had something that put off EM, it would be impossible to make that happen. But we made it happen for over 5 minutes. And, you know, I don't think it helped him any. We never really had him back on investigation.
No, and John did fail to mention that the newspaper reporter that came with us was supposed to stay the whole night, and he sat through one session that had some activity and decided that he had enough information to write his article. And so he got out of there.
Yikes. Didn't happen to get it on film by any chance?
Actually, yes. Tim Clark, our old partner, who was also with us on the Haunted South Paranormal podcast, should have that footage still, because good old Tim he never throws anything away. So mm-hmm. That would be actually something we should dig out and post somewhere. That's a great idea.
Yeah, that would be an interesting film to watch, simply because you've got video proof of something going on.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, that's the best kind, and just having that that validation, you know, because it's something that anybody who's ever dealt with one of these K2 meters knows is virtually impossible to do.
Mm-hmm. In y'all's book, you talk about the Black House. Where was that at?
So that was a house that we were buying in Hampton, Tennessee. And when we moved in, we didn't realize that there was anything, you know, there, haunted-wise or anything. But after we moved in, a lot of really crazy stuff started to happen. And we found out later, after we had moved in, that the lady that lived there before died there downstairs in where my son's bedroom was. And so almost immediately after moving in, there were some really strange things that happened. Like our son got locked into a room that didn't actually have a lock on it, and he couldn't get out. We had a dog at the time when we moved in, and we ended up having to put the dog to sleep because the dog just went crazy and started being very aggressive with everyone in the family. And one of our, daughters was very small, and it wasn't safe for her anymore. So we ended up having to put the dog down. And just a lot of different things. I believe everybody in our family was affected.
The scary thing about it is, we did all have experiences there. There was full-bodied apparitions that were seen by the kids or visitors to the house. Would actually see the full-bodied apparitions. Hey, somebody was standing outside the shower, or things like this would happen, and plus there was a darkness over our family during this time, and everywhere we have lived together, there's been hauntings. We've had some severe hauntings that have followed us, but during that time period, the way I investigated was not very safe. Before the days of Ghost Adventures, I was very in your face before that was actually something anybody seemed to be doing, but very aggressive on investigations, very come at me kind of style, just to get the activity going. And of course, over the years, I've learned my mistakes, and I also thought it was cool the darker the haunting, the better, and just really some tragic mistakes during that time period. But I come to find out in later years, if you ever look up hauntings of East Tennessee, you'll find, if you can look up Gap Creek Road in Carter County or in Elizabethton, Tennessee, and there's several stories of Gap Creek Road hauntings. That was what we lived on, was Gap Creek Road, which borders the Cherokee National Forest, and there's a little area there. It's like, I believe certain areas are tainted. And I was talking to an investigator from another team who told me the darkest cases he had ever had were in that same area. He said the one confirmed demonic haunting that he had dealt with, and this guy had done it for years and years. He said that it was very near the house that we lived in. And, he said that one ended tragically. And there's a lot of lore and stories about that entire area being sort of somewhat cursed. And I'll tell you this, the reason we called it the Black House is the day we moved out, that whole year, it was the worst year probably of my entire life. And Stacey and I were even having issues and stuff, and that's never happened, ever. And so the kids were starting to, our older kids were having problems, and there was just so much going on. The day we moved out, our youngest daughter, who was just really starting to say sentences at the time, she was like 3 years old, and we were it was almost like a movie. We were in the Ryder truck, and we had everything packed up. It was me, Stacey, and Ariana, our daughter, in the middle of us. And she goes, "I don't ever want to go back to the Black House." Well, the house is absolutely white. Everything about the house is white. The paint, the siding, everything is white. And, that we looked at each other. It was just like the creepiest thing ever. But after we moved out of there, Chris, it wasn't, I'd say 3-4 months, and we were just like we were dating again. I mean, it was the best time we'd ever had. It was like this big veil had been lifted off of us. And really, it was weird because when the house was empty, we had sold it already, but it was still empty and I could still get in it. I actually took a team in there just to investigate for my own satisfaction. And everybody that was with us that night, we witnessed some amazing things, some physical manipulation. There was windows there that were sealed up because it had central heat and air. One of those windows just flies up, breaks the seal, and just flies up. There was a levitation of a dust of like a little, not a broom, dustpan. I couldn't think. Dustpan just flies up in the air and flies across the room, and like 3 people seen this. My friend, and who still investigates with us, still joins us on the sideshow from time to time, Travis Molden, he captured with his video camera a full-body apparition of an old man. And the old man just turns and looks to the camera. It was one of the creepiest things we'd ever seen. And it was just interesting, you know, but when we got out of there, it was completely different. The energy was different in the family. Everything was better, but we still carry the scars from that place.
Was that where you had that experience with the couple that parked on your front lawn?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. That was that house, and that was one of those. I call it the people at the door because there's no real way to talk about it other than that. That experience still gives me chills when I talk about it. It's, you know, I would babysit because we worked different shifts. Stacey was a bank manager at the time in her real world, and I was let's just say I was fighting criminals. That was what my job was. So I worked a different schedule. But I was sleeping with my daughter, my little baby girl, and I heard somebody, you know, like before they were even at the door, I could hear this cackling. Now, we had a very quiet neighborhood. It was a little cul-de-sac. Everybody was older that lived there, so nobody was really, the only thing you would ever hear would be a lawnmower. There was nothing going on. We're talking in the woods of Tennessee. There's no commerce or business or anything near this. This is out in the country. So, you know, I'm laying there and sleeping, and out of a dead sleep, I just hear laughing and cackling and talking a little bit, but mostly the laughing. And I got this weird, ominous feeling that you get sometimes, like a sixth sense, when you just know somebody's looking at you from somewhere. And, you know, and it's just this thing we have as humans we can't explain. But I'm not saying I'm Billy, you know, bad butt or whatever. You know, I'm just saying that I'm scared too easily or get too frightened about things. And I heard this happening, and I had this very ominous feeling. I got up, and for whatever reason, I was tiptoeing, and it was a split level, so I could walk down the hallway and look down the steps and see the door, the front door. I was about the time I got to where the front door is, I was hearing the laughing, and it was very loud, and that's when they started beating on the door. Now, they were beating like closed fist, hammer fisting the door. You know, it wasn't just a normal knock. Out of nowhere, they were just doing this right off the bat. So I was frozen. I was frozen in fear. I don't know why. You know, fight or flight, I always just think about protecting my family or protecting myself, grabbing my gun, whatever. But I was standing there, and they were beating on that door, and it was just laughing, and it was honestly terrifying. Like, I can't even liken it to anything else that I've experienced, but I started moving. I wanted to see who was out there, but instead of just walking straight over to the picture window so I could look down to the left and see the people, I still tiptoed because I didn't even want to make a creak. I didn't want to make any kind of sound. But I got over there, and we had, of course, the shades the blinds were down, and I sort of put my fingers and pulled the blinds apart and looked through the blinds just enough to see. And I looked down, and it's a guy and a girl, and it looked like, honestly, like I always say out of time, it looks like they walked out of a 1975 Mountain Dew commercial. She had like this long hair, and just the clothes they were wearing didn't even seem to fit. It was just very strange. There was a nondescript car like in the yard, just that I didn't pay much attention to. I'll admit that, but it was facing outwards, like if you were trying to go away from the house, because it was a cul-de-sac, not where they would have to turn around in a circle. And they were just laughing. They didn't look up to where I was or anything. And, you know, they were hitting the door so hard by this time that daylight was coming through the cracks around the door where it was bending in a little bit. And this was a big, like, steel door, but it was being hit so hard that I could actually see the daylight. And I just decided, you know what, I kind of snapped out of it and snapped out of the fear. And I was just going to go get my gun at the time. I was just going to jump and get my pistol and, you know, see what was going on, because, I mean, this was definitely a threat. And so I turned around and walked to get my pistol, and it just stopped. About the time I got back over to the steps, it just stopped. And I stood there and looked at the door for a second, probably for about 30 seconds, honestly. And by the time I do that to walk back over to the curtain, they are gone. I mean, the car's gone. Weird thing is, I didn't hear the car leave. Mm-hmm. I didn't hear the doors shut on the car. I mean, they obviously did, but I don't know how they decided or did all that. The strange thing was, it was almost like there was a connection between me and them, because when I snapped out of it, they left. And that fear and ominous feeling I had is something I never usually have. So it reminded me of my friend who has written the books on the black-eyed children, David Weatherly. Mm-hmm. We've discussed this many times, and you know, it's similar. It's not the same. Obviously, they weren't kids. They were younger, but they weren't kids, so it doesn't match all that. They weren't asking to come in. They were actually being violent. But it's weird in that same sense of weirdness, you know.
You never got to see their eyes, or?
No, not from the way they were standing. I didn't. I wish I had of, but I didn't see their eyes, and I didn't know about the black-eyed kids at the time. It would be about 3 years until I met David Weatherly. After that, and we, you know, the first time that we discussed all of that would be about 2010, and so this was a few years before that.
I ran into David at Jefferson at a Bigfoot convention, and I keep trying to get him on the show, but his schedule and mine just do not match up.
Yeah, he is a busy man. He absolutely is either doing a convention or globe trotting or living the life I want to live. So we'll say that.
You talk about the Scooby-Doo maneuver. How in the heck did you come up with that, and how does it work?
Okay, so I love this story because it's absolutely true, and it's the funniest thing that they could have done. So this was during an investigation at Waverly Hills, which is a place we love to go. We always try to go as often as we can, even though we've been there 100 times. But so John and Tim, who was on our team, were walking down a hallway, and I believe they saw a shadow figure. Is that right? That came out of a doorway?
Yeah, I mean, it was the shadow figure is at an actual different time, but yes, we saw a shadow on the same night, which was insane because we ran after it. That's a good story on its own, because that's the one where Tim's like, I have no idea what in the world we just did, but
that's right. And this happened right after that.
This happened after that while we were still, but I can't just leave that now for the people. So I'll let you get back to the Scooby-Doo maneuver in a second. Tim and I were on the first floor, and we were shining our flashlights around, and we shined our flashlight on this is comedic as well, on a shadow that didn't light up. Like, the darkness didn't light up. There was a shadow still there, and it darted, and Tim and I both experienced this, and we just take off run. I'm like, get it. And Tim and I take off running after this thing, and we go into a room, and of course there's nothing there at that point, but we actually seen it dart off, and we chased it, and he looks at me, and he's like, I don't even know why the hell we did that. He's like, what were we going to do if we caught it?
Isn't that what Bill Murray yelled in
so yeah.
So after that happened, I just remembered it was the same night. They were walking down the hallway. Same area. And as they're walking, it's like they can hear something walking behind them, like footsteps. And so they would walk, and then they would stop, and they would hear a couple footsteps. kind of like almost like a cartoon. And so they'd start walking again, and they'd stop, and they'd hear a couple footsteps. So it was like something was following them. And so they were trying to be really discreet about it, and they're sort of whispering. They're like, do you hear that? And Tim's like, yeah, I hear it. And John's like, okay, look, we're going to walk, and then when I count to 3, we're just going to turn around really quick and shine our flashlights back there to see if there's anything back there. So they're walking, and they're like, 1, 2, 3, and they just turn around, and of course, nothing's there, even though they could hear the footsteps. But they call it the Scooby-Doo maneuver because it was like a Scooby-Doo cartoon to be followed like that.
Yeah, actually, once again, Stacey.
Yes.
Yeah, Stacey got it wrong. That's actually when we turned around. That's when I seen the bottom half of a spirit, and it was the flesh. We're actually seeing it with the flesh and the legs. This is why you can't tell my stories.
Exactly.
It was the bottom half, not the top half. It was just the legs, and it was one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. I don't know if I've ever seen anything more disturbing than that. It's not that it was scary, but it was the bottom half of somebody naked, just flesh, and it walked into the pharmacy, I believe. It was just really quickly, but it walked into the pharmacy. The whole Scooby-Doo thing comes from, obviously, that was so Scooby-Doo to us that we would stop, and we could still hear somebody shuffling behind us. So it was just the Scooby-Doo maneuver, just what we called it, so we would know if we were walking down a hallway to say that. But it actually, we would hear the footsteps. I think that happened to us one other time over the years. But somebody else on the team later that night actually saw the same in the same place, saw the legs go into a room, and also described the seeing. It was still transparent somewhat, but it was that flesh color of the bottom half.
Was the Waverly Hills where you also had that guest that was so outstanding?
Kane Hodder, yes, Mr. Kane Hodder, who comes from Jason Voorhees. He played Jason Voorhees in the good Friday the 13th movies,
the first couple.
But yeah, exactly. He's probably the most famous one to have played Jason because he still does all the conventions. He still does horror movies, and he has the word "kill" tattooed inside his bottom lip, which is interesting among itself. Yeah, I got to see that firsthand. But no, we were there, and Tina drove up on her golf cart, the owner there of Waverly, and she's like, "John, I know you guys got the place for the night, and I don't know if you'd mind, but there's some guy who says he's from Hollywood, and he says he played Jason in Friday the 13th. And I was like, Kane Hodder? She goes, yeah, that's his name. And I was like, yeah, hell yeah, he could come with us. So it was, Kane said that it was his first organized paranormal investigation, that, he had been in haunted places before, but it was his first investigation. And we still have all the camcorder footage from that night, but I tell you, being locked inside that, arguably the most haunted building in the United States with Jason Voorhees is quite the experience. But the funny event happened with him because he was very skeptical, but we were on the first floor, again, the first floor, as weird as that is. I believe the fourth floor to be the darkest and most haunted, but we were on the first floor, and we were walking room to room and just doing some call and response EVP, and it was myself and again Tim and Kane Hodder and a girl who I don't remember her name. She was with Kane, but as we were doing this, we would just do some EVP, and in one of the rooms, I'm sitting there with nobody to the left of me, and Tim's sitting across the room from me. But there's a chair beside me, but there's nobody there. And so we're talking and doing all this EVP. Kane's sort of standing to my right, and just sort of watching everything happen and all that good stuff. So we go from that room, nothing. There was a few things, like I heard some gravels moved over to my left, oddly enough. Just heard some rocks on the floor or something, and that's weird. But we go to the next room, and in that room we could see each other a little better. There was some windows, and there was a little moonlight coming in, and we could see each other pretty well. And we started to just have a conversation instead of doing the EVP at the time. And we were standing there, and Kane goes, "Where's the other guy?" And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. It's just us. He's like, "No, the other guy. Where's the other guy at?" I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's just me and Tim and you and her. And he's like, "The other guy who was right beside you in that room back there." And I was like, guess what? You just had an experience. Because that's all he wanted to do was have a paranormal experience. And I was like, okay, who wins the prize? You do. Because it was pretty interesting, though. Fun night.
And you got to do an investigation with Jason.
Yeah, exactly. That's not many people can say that. We've got the pictures to prove it, as they say.
You have a thing you called the keeper theory. Could you explain that to the folks?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to try to explain the keeper?
No, this one's your favorite. You know
it. Over the years doing these investigations, as you do them, you start developing theories. And, the more you do the investigations, you'll notice patterns. One place goes to the other. There are certain things that, although there's no exact science, there's not a textbook, there are certain things that fall within the same categories, and you at least start realizing. And there was one thing that I noticed without even having a name for it, but I would discuss it. And everybody who's ever been on an investigation has, at one time or another, experienced the same feeling or occurrence. When you're doing a EVP session, let's just say EVP or EMF session, it doesn't matter, some kind of session, and everything's really hot. It's active. You're getting all kinds of great responses. You're doing shaving a haircut and somebody's knocking 2 bits. It's everything. Hey, turn my flashlight on. It turns it on. Turn it off. It turns it off. Slap Stacey. It slaps Stacey. Everything you want to happen is happening. And then all of a sudden, it goes dead. It goes completely dead. There's no activity. There's no feeling. You get almost angry, And over the years, if you watch paranormal TV, a lot of times they'll say, well, it's used up all its energy, whatever. And that's a good possibility because they are made of energy like we are. But, it always bothered me still. And what I noticed was it was normally when we were getting some really good responses and at bigger locations normally. So at some of the hospitals and prisons and things like this, a big abandoned building. A lot of times this would happen. I'd be getting, some awesome responses, and then it would just stop. And, when I would go back and review evidence later on, Chris, I would notice a lot of times I would hear some crazy EVPs right before the activity stopped. One in particular, I was in an apartment that was, supposed to be haunted, and we had a camera set up. We were trying to take some, really big flash photography pictures in the room while I was doing the EVP. And we were getting some great responses from a female spirit, and I didn't know this at the time until we reviewed this. And that's when we got it. We still have all these EVPs. So we're doing the camera, and the girl is talking, and she's like, camera and light, and saying all these great thing. She's answering our questions. And we start recording in that particular corner, and there's a dark, growly voice come over, and it just goes, "Turn the camera off." And we have that Class A EVP, and there's no activity after that happened. That one really bothered, yeah, exactly. That one really bothered me, but where I got the keeper name is we had got called in to do a movie theater, an operational, active movie theater with 7 theaters that was having horrific activity. The activity was actually so bad that these bolted down rows of theater seats had been lifted up with the bolts broken.
Yikes.
From this, yeah, exactly. From this entity. They didn't want this to be public. They were like, look, we have to have kids come here. We have everybody come here. We don't really want this advertised. But can you come and do this? So we've done over 20 investigations at that place back then, because our investigations are like that. We like to be able to go and let the investigation unfold, develop. So we had some of the most amazing things happen there, EVPs that are just unreal. There had been a reported death in the place of a janitor who died in the most haunted theater, actually. And we even got old land records to find out the families that were there, because there was a spirit named Billy, and we actually got all kinds of EVPs from Billy. Anything you want to happen would happen there. And we were having this great activity, and most of the spirits were docile. Most of the spirits were happy. Most of the spirits were like Billy, who would say flashlight, in like a little kid voice. And everything was going real good. But there was also a dark spirit there. The same spirit that, allegedly pulled up these theater seats. And I had 3 theater employees tell me about this happening, as they experienced it because they heard these huge bangs, and it scared them to death. And I was in the theater, and we actually captured a full-body apparition in the same theater during the same time. This was in Theater 5. And the full-body apparition is this foggy-looking apparition, but it looks like it's holding a gun over its shoulder. Very Civil War looking. And we still have that photo as well. But it's a awesome little thing that happened. And during that time, one of the girls on our team, Ashley, got attacked. So it was a very weird night, but was getting this great, again, activity. Everything I wanted to have happen. And it was knocking once for yes, twice for no, doing everything. So it goes cold. Absolutely goes cold again. And this kept happening in this theater, the same thing I've been talking about. So we were back in the theater again the next time, and I'm talking to it, and I'm just like, we're getting some great, great stuff again. And I was like, could you please tell me, if you can hear me, if you can hear my voice, can you tell me, who is keeping you from talking to us? Because it's okay. It's okay to speak with us. There is nobody that's going to stop you. And the response I get, Class A EVP, says the keeper will. And when I got that, I was reviewing like the next night, and I kept going back to that over and over. And I was like, is that saying the keeper will? I was like, that's so weird. And I ended up getting another EVP from the place referring to the keeper. And like they were calling it the keeper. So I just used that name to describe the entire phenomena that happens in so many places, where one controlling spirit, usually an evil type spirit, I don't want to say demon, okay, but a strong spirit, a negative spirit, seems to corral the other spirits. It seems to hold them, I don't know, in the facility or control what's going on. And of course, we don't have all the answers to what happens next. And and we don't really know, but to really hammer this theory home, at Waverly Hills one night, Tina said, "Hey, do you want to see something cool?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." We were hanging out on a break down in her office in the gift shop, and she's like, "Look at this security camera footage." So she shows us their security camera footage, and what it shows is amazing. So an orb travels to the gate, and at the front gate, like for a split second, becomes a full shadow person. At that time, another orb darts to the gate and seemingly pulls this other orb back. So you'll see two orbs return back into the facility. And it was almost like, and when I was standing there, one of my team members looks at me and goes, "My God, that's the keeper. That's your keeper theory." It was like that it had grabbed it and brought it back in. And, that place with tuberculosis, if you were on that fourth floor dying, when they had you there with the windows out and they had removed a couple of your ribs just to hope that you could breathe for another day or another few minutes. You couldn't see your family members. You were behind glass. A lot of times you were just forgotten about. Your family didn't even want your corpse afterwards. And, I don't know who would you ask, or, what kind of deal would somebody like that make for just another gasp of air? I don't know. But that fourth floor where they would keep those people was so dark and negative, and every time I've been there. But yeah, the keeper theory is just something that, like I said, I think everybody has probably experienced this at one time or another.
That's quite an interesting place. I've seen a lot of other people investigating there, but I've never been myself just because it's a long drive.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. From you it is.
What is...
You need to do it once.
What is a paranormal pajama party?
A paranormal pajama party. I'm going to have to actually refresh myself on that one.
Okay. I read it in the book, and it didn't stick in my mind, but I just wrote down paranormal pajama party, hoping that it could get clarified. But, well, how about telling...
It sounds like something I would refer to with a bunch of our former girls that we had on the team. I released a whole team of psychics one time, and
it's probably part of your paper booth area where you're talking about how teams all go to different locations and pay to get in and have the paranormal pajama party. Yeah, like because when you pay to go to a location like that, you spend a lot of money and you plan this big trip, and then you have really high expectations. And so you expect when you go that all this amazing stuff's going to happen because you've spent all this time and effort
and
to
you've
get
seen
to
it
this
on
location
TV
that everybody else has done.
Yeah, I do recall the pay for boo in the same paragraph, but we can save that for another time. But it was a funny... would y'all...
Yeah, she's right.
Would y'all tell the audience about your podcast? You've had 3 now?
Yeah, the first one that we started was called Haunted South, and we actually went to a local television studio, and the guy that ran the studio there sort of set the podcast up for us. He built us a podcast room, and he did all of the technical side of it. We just went, and we were the hosts. We got the guests, and we did the news and the content. But that was our first sort of experience with podcasting, and that started in 2010, and it was really popular. I think at the time there were not a lot of paranormal podcasts going on. There was a few. So then after we did that, John, with his regular job, he has to move around quite a lot, and we ended up having to move a few times, but we decided to start the third side, which was more of a YouTube video show. We had a set. We had another gentleman that owned his own studio in his home, and he has a very haunted location that he lived in, and he thought it would be cool to set up a studio for us to do our podcast from his place, since there was already so much activity there.
Yeah, absolutely. If you ever, if nobody has seen that or have only listened to us on the Paranormal Sideshow, which she'll talk about that, but I would implore you to go to the Third Side. If you look up Third Side Paranormal, you should find it, and it's still got a YouTube channel. We're in the process of moving those over to the Paranormal Sideshow YouTube, but it was we purposely wanted a 1975 looking cable access channel, midnight cheesy horror, bat on a string kind of thing.
Joe Bob Briggs,
where we would do it.
Yeah. So we did that for a while, but then we ended up having to move to Maine. Mm-hmm. And so we weren't able to go to any of our studios that we normally went to. So that's when we started the Paranormal Sideshow. And this was the first time we did the podcast completely on our own. We bought all our equipment and we set up our own studio, and we just started doing it all ourselves, every bit of it. So we've been doing the Sideshow since 2016, isn't it? And that's the one we still do now, and it's really starting to take off. We've got about 80 episodes so far, and we have the YouTube channel where we try to put some extra content up, and the website, theparanormalsideshow.com, has links for all kinds of stuff, and we do a newsletter and just a bunch of things.
I heard John say something about a Bobby Dazzler. I can only assume that means that y'all watch The Curse of Oak Island.
We do. We love Gary Drayton. We think he's great, and we love when he finds Bobby Dazzlers.
He's quite a character. That accent of his, though, I can't understand half of what he says, but
I don't think anybody can.
True.
I believe they just nod their head and agree.
Do you think, either of y'all, they're ever going to figure out what's at the bottom of that pit?
So I really do believe that the things that they have found are astounding and mind-boggling. When you find these human remains from hundreds of years ago, 170 feet below the ground, which makes absolutely no sense. Or you find, shreds of this and pieces of that really are in places they shouldn't be. And so obviously something happened there. And I just really believe that there is some sort of curse. I really do. I think that there is something protecting whatever is down there or has happened there, because it seems like it's nearly impossible, or it's always trying to mess up with, there's gremlins in the machine kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That's the interesting part about it, is there always seems to be something that they find that just makes you more hungry to get and find out more, and with all the millions of dollars sank into it, I sure hope they do find something that pays off.
Yeah, I'm torn between Rick and Marty have sunk so much money into that place. They've got to find something to make the effort and the money worth it. But at the same time, it's like, that's a mystery that I've been following since I was, I don't know, about 18 years old, and I'd really hate to see it go away. But at the same time, I want to know what's down there.
Well, what's your thoughts? I mean, what does your heart tell you is down there? Like, who put it there, in your opinion?
I am very much in favor of the Templars. They were fanatics. They built things that lasted, and they were just crazy enough to build something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there, I agree with you, by the way. And but the treasure, what would you think that is?
Something we're not supposed to have, like maybe the Ark.
Exactly.
Because you don't put something in an inaccessible place if you can't get to it yourself, unless you don't want to get to it. So,
right.
That's what I'm thinking. It's going to be something.
Yeah, I do too.
The bad thing is, whenever they do discover what's down there, no matter what it is, it's still going to be just a bit of a disappointment, because, well, there goes that mystery.
Right. Right. And I agree with you totally on this. The thing about it is it's so intricate, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when they put it down there, they've done so much with it to make sure that you can't get in there, just like you said. And it's the kind of mystery though that keeps us going. People like you and us, and we obviously love things that are unexplained, and it's just keeps the imagination going. But I do believe, as you do, it's something we're not supposed to see. We're not supposed to have. It needed to go somewhere that it was going to be undisturbed. And probably when they escaped with their lives, the few that did, on that notorious Friday the 13th, I believe that they brought these treasures to a new world that they had time to really dig and hide everything they needed. Now, oddly enough, there's a UFO story that's never really talked about on that show, but I remember an Ancient Alien segment where they talk about those boys
mm-hmm.
seeing a light, like a light coming down, and but it's never really, even though the same people do the show,
mm-hmm.
it's never really mentioned, and I'm sure that they don't want to mention it just to keep it more legit.
You've got
not
the
get
history.
a bad thing about it.
You got the history people that watch Oak Island because it's a historical event. And then you got the UFO people that watch Ancient Aliens. And there are those that go to both shows, because I watch them both all the time. But there are a lot of people that you start talking UFOs, and that's it. They're out of here. So.
Yeah, absolutely. But so are you familiar with the segment I'm talking about,
yes.
The Ancient Alien segment
mm-hmm.
on Oak Island?
I've also seen Marty Lagina on Ancient Aliens. He was in.
Okay.
He was in some part of Italy, I believe. They're looking for buried remains of someone. So.
Yeah, no, I didn't see that, so that's cool. But yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, we definitely don't watch many. Admittedly, we don't watch many shows.
Mm-hmm.
We're very, very busy, and we've been working on something as well for a couple of years now. Ever since I did Ghost Brothers. So, but the shows that we do watch, we watch that, and we watch a smattering of some paranormal shows. But I believe basically I could live on just watching Oak Island and watching like Deadliest Catch. I would be fine the rest of my life. So.
I've gotten a little away from Deadliest Catch, but I do kind of like the Civil War gold and the World War II gold, and I just wish these guys would find something.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's. I think part of it's the journey. It's. I love Josh Gates' first show. Destination mm-hmm. Truth, and the best part I loved about that was actually the getting there.
Mm-hmm.
Was so much more than the actual destination.
Yeah, the interaction with his crew, because you don't see that in any other show. Here's the sound.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Here's the sound man is out running around in the dark looking for monsters, or here's the cameraman being yanked backwards out of that circle in Romania. It scared the heck out of
God, yeah. That Romania thing is that's on my list.
Mm-hmm.
I want to experience that so bad. And he don't even do that on his show anymore though, with his crew like you're talking about, and that was the best part.
I think probably the production people were saying, look, these guys they're support, we're not going to start paying them to be members of the big crew, so.
Right, yeah, because you do have to pay them if they're on air, so definitely.
Well, we've been talking for a little over an hour now. I think I have to let y'all get back to dinner or whatever it is you're about to go do. I appreciate y'all being on the show.
Well, we thank you very much for having us, and we're going to have to put that invite out to you.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you would be an excellent person to have on the Realm of Shadow show, where we take a more serious route. That's our Patreon show, and really just cover a topic. And I would really love to hear more about the Laredo Paranormal Research Society.
Did y'all get the book?
Did
y'all get the book I sent you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes, we absolutely do. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I've kind of flipped through it. It looks really interesting.
As far as I know, everything in there is true. So, is there anything you'd like to say to the audience before I let y'all go?
You can just let them know to find us. Just go to paranormalsideshow.com, and all of the links for the podcast and everything are there. And you can also check us out this year at Scarefest. If you're going to be there, we are speaking at Scarefest this year. So if you want to meet us, we'll have a table and we'll have a lecture.
And that will be in Lexington, Kentucky, September 12th through 15th. We have a couple of other cons before then, but it's that's really our big one. That's our favorite. So yeah, come out and see us if you're in the area. And other than that, you can catch us every week on the Sideshow.
And where can people get a copy of your book?
They can go to Amazon.com and just search Til Death and Beyond, and you can buy it there, or you can actually buy it from our website if you want to. If you buy it from our website, the price includes shipping, and it is autographed, so we'll send it straight out to you.
And I understand you kiss the books, too, before you send them out. That's John. That's John that kisses them, right?
Normally that would be an extra charge, but we're allowing Stacey for a limited time to kiss every book there, and I won't do anything bad to him. So but no, it's we have a lot of fun with it. We actually had a harrowing experience on this past podcast of ours, and we put a video out on YouTube about it.
I was listening to that.
I would invite.
Yeah, the headset was moving around and the light was flicking on and off.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. It was one of the wildest things that we've had happen during a podcast. But I was on my anti-government. Well, not really anti. I'm not anti-government, but I'm anti not telling us the truth.
Yes.
About the UFOs, and it reminds me, and I know that we've used up our time here, but just it reminds me of when gas went up. Mm-hmm. Okay, gas goes up to $10. They lower it to $5, and everybody's thank you, sir, thank you so much. But in essence, they raised it $3 when all was said and done. I feel like that's what they do with us when the Navy comes out and says, "All right, we can call them UAPs now. They're real. There's 3 or 4 months, and they do things we can't even define." And we have a couple of warehouses that have alloys and everything in it. Everybody cheers, exciting, slow disclosure, but it just made me mad because what about the 70 years that we've been lied to about this? And I was going off about that, and a lamp. We had moved from we had a little podcast room that we put up all the noise dampening things and stuff. So we had moved, made a makeshift actually in our bedroom, just for 2 shows, and while we were painting the room. And so anyway, we were in here, and the lamp, new lamp, it's about a year old, less than a year old, just starts doing some amazing stuff. Actually, I'll tell you what, there is a video on the Paranormal Sideshow YouTube channel. It's about a 10-minute video. I would implore everybody that's listening to check out that video because it explains everything. Stacey did a fantastic job. It really was compelling to Stacey. We actually had some video of everything that happened. We did little EVP. We have all that. She chronicled it all and made a video of it. So it is on the Paranormal Sideshow YouTube. And you can just search Paranormal Sideshow, and that channel comes up, and it's the newest video.
Well, like I said, I appreciate y'all being on the show. Let y'all get back to your life, and I highly encourage anybody out there listening to check out Paranormal Sideshow. It's a very good podcast.
Thank you, Chris. Have a great night.
Okay, see y'all later. And that's the show for tonight. That was John and Stacey Edwards from Paranormal Sideshow. Till next Saturday, this is Chris James.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murder 3. Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?